right? So you get a placenta accreta, and it's a
Hmm.
significant increase in the odds of that happening after just one cesarean birth, and it could be a significant complication. So again, that
Hmm.
would seem like something that even when you're making the decision for what to do now with this first pregnancy breech baby, that
Hmm.
you would want to take into account, but it's rarely mentioned.
Hi, I'm Rachel, owner of the Natural Birth site, certified birth doula, childbirth educator, and midwife's assistant.
And I'm Tiffany Munez, certified birth doula, lactation counselor, and midwife assistant.
Here, you'll learn all about different aspects of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum.
Remember, none of this information should take the place of your care provider and is not medical advice.
Birth is not a medical emergency.
Thanks for listening.
Hey, listeners, welcome to the Natural Birth Talk. I'm your host, Rachel. Unfortunately, Tiffany is not able to be here today. She is feeling under the weather. If she starts feeling better this morning, she might hop on at some point. But for now, we are continuing to record without her. We are here with Dr. Berlin today from the Informed Pregnancy podcast, as well as Informed Pregnancy Plus, which is a streaming service. But I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Elliot Berlin. I am a pregnancy-focused chiropractor here in Los Angeles, California. My wife is a perinatal psychologist, and together we kind of work the mind body for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. That's the mainstay of what we do. And we run Informed Pregnancy Media, trying to, with teamwork from other amazing hosts and educators like Rachel. Thank you for having me here today.
Of
Uh, we,
course.
we try to put together information and package it in a way that's easy to digest
Mhm.
and empower people to make choices, especially when it comes to their own healthcare and more specifically for this journey to parenthood.
I love that. And I love that you and your wife take a kind of whole body approach, the body and the mind, because that is something huge that Tiffany and I are always talking about is how important your mind is in pregnancy and birth. So we think you do great work. We love your podcast. We love Informed Pregnancy Plus. It's one of our ads that runs on our podcast regularly. So we're big fans over here. Um,
Rachel.
thank you. So the biggest thing that I would like to talk with you about today is vaginal breech birth,
Okay.
one of my
I've never had
favorites.
one, but
Makes sense.
I sort of was one back in 1974 before I think anybody cared too much about breech birth. And according to my mom, they didn't realize I was breech
Hmm.
until I came out, and nobody seemed too concerned about it. But apparently the next day they decided nobody else should be able to do this. Uh,
Right.
it's like, I'm like, what happened? They took a look at me and they wiped it off the table.
Aw. Well, back then, I think a lot of providers were still pretty skilled in vaginal breech birth, and we have kind of stopped teaching that.
Absolutely. So it all kind of stems back to the term breech trial. And to
Mm.
give a little context, it's not, there's no malintent here from what they were doing. What
Hmm.
happened was, you go back 100 years, cesarean birth was happening. It was not a pretty picture.
Hmm.
It wasn't safe. Sometimes when they did a C-section, you would automatically lose your uterus. It was like a radical cesarean.
Okay.
Um, Prior to that, they only did it because the mother and baby were both going to die, and we were going to try to save one,
Yeah.
um, with hopes of saving two, but not being reality on the radar. Needless to say, since then, cesarean birth has improved a tremendous amount. Science has
Yes.
improved a tremendous amount. Surgery has improved a tremendous amount. What we understand about germs and infection has improved. And so today, cesarean birth is pretty straightforward, quick, easy, probably the most common surgery done in America. And it's very reliable and predictable and safe.
Hmm.
So the question started to become, who is going to be better off having a cesarean birth versus a vaginal birth, which is a very
Hmm.
fair question for this new technology that we have.
Yeah.
And some are more obvious than others. If your placenta is fully blocking your cervix and your baby has to smash through it to come out the other side, that's pretty clear. I don't know anybody who doesn't agree that a cesarean would be a better way to go.
Yeah.
And we started to apply the question to more and more things. If there's
Hmm.
an active STD lesion or other things that could
Hmm.
create problems. maybe the cesarean was a better way to go. So in the late 90s, they posed this question to Breech.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a breech baby vaginally, a couple of things could go wrong that don't happen with head down babies typically, and that also don't happen in a cesarean birth. The
Mm-hmm.
two main ones are that when the baby comes out, you could get the whole baby to come out, but the head gets stuck, so you get
Mm-hmm.
head entrapment. And then the other thing is, if there's nothing blocking the cervix, then the first thing that comes through the cervix into the birth canal would be the umbilical cord. And then the baby comes through after that and can
Mm-hmm.
compress the cord, which is a pretty dangerous complication of umbilical cord prolapse. So it's a fair question. Hey, now that we
Mm-hmm.
have a way to get the baby out, safely, reliably, predictably, without risking those things, are we better off doing that than having breech babies come through vaginally?
Yeah.
The term breech trial, then, so it was done in Canada. Mary Hannah and her team were the researchers at McGill University. And essentially, I'm simplifying, but they essentially took 2,000 women who were pregnant with breech babies, and they said, with consent, that randomly 1,000 would go for the vaginal birth and
Mm-hmm.
1,000 would go for the cesarean birth. I say go for it because they didn't all exactly happen that way. Even if you're scheduled
Right.
for the vaginal birth, you might have ended up in a cesarean. And even if you were
Mm-hmm.
scheduled for cesarean birth and just went into labor before you had your chance, before your scheduled date, you might have had a vaginal birth. But that was the plan. And
Okay.
then assessing the outcomes of those babies right after birth. And the study found a small but statistically significant better outcome for breech babies who were born by cesarean versus breech babies that were born vaginally.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing that happened, also, I don't think with malintent, but I think is a big mistake, is the United States and Canada virtually wiped the choice for vaginal breech delivery off the menu. And
Yes.
so they made the recommendation, not a law, but recommendation that all breech babies be born by plain cesarean, generally at 39 weeks.
Yeah.
When that happened, people stopped doing breech birth, and
Yeah.
because they didn't have the choice,
Mm-hmm.
all they were told, and risk is a funny thing. The way you present it makes a huge difference. But they
Right.
were just told this is risky, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we do has risk. I get into my car and
Of
drive. There
course.
is risk. Does that make it risky? I think that determination can only be made by the person taking the risk.
Mm-hmm.
And we do things, we take risks because there are benefits. So,
Mm-hmm.
if I want to get to the market, I can either walk for an hour or I can get in my car and drive and take that risk. But sometimes for one person, that same set of risks and benefits, they'll make the determination, I don't want to take these risks for that benefit. It's not worth it to me. And another person will say, heck yeah, I'm definitely taking this risk for that benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And we do the same thing with health choices, and also birth is no exception. We make those kind of determinations all the time. So for someone to
Mm-hmm.
tell you that something is risky or not risky seems out of step for me. That's like the first mistake, because what I
Right.
really should be telling you is these are the
What
risks
are
that
the
are
risks?
involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are the odds that they happen, and what would happen if it did happen?
Yes.
What are the alternatives? And then you kind of make a choice, or we make a choice together,
Mm-hmm.
not me tell you this is no longer a choice for you. You can't do this. You have to do this, as if cesarean birth has no risks.
Right.
You know?
Right. Because that's how it is often presented, that cesarean birth has no risks and vaginal breech birth is really, really risky. And I think a lot of doctors actually believe that. Like you said, there's not necessarily malintent. They actually believe that, maybe because they were never trained in college on how to do a vaginal breech birth, maybe because their college professor drilled it in their head that this was not safe, or maybe they had a personal experience.
I think that all of those are probably contributing factors. So when you spend the bulk of your life training to do something,
Mm-hmm.
you really have to buy into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if medicine is your thing, technological health is your thing, drugs and surgery are your thing, then you really have to buy into that as
Mm-hmm.
the premium choice. And, you see this all the time, like a doctor that just doesn't understand why somebody would have
Mm-hmm.
an unmedicated birth when we have all this cool technology that can make you feel absolutely nothing while you're giving birth,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what they buy into. And so my experience, my finding is that many medical doctors uh, see the value in intervention
Mm-hmm.
and maybe magnify the value of the intervention and minimize the downsides of those interventions,
Yeah.
the unwanted side effects or the risks of those interventions. And it almost becomes a black and white picture. Of course, we're going to do this. And it's not like it
Hmm.
would be any different for themselves. If they themselves were in the same boat, they would
Hmm.
also take away the choice from themselves and believe wholeheartedly that they did the best thing for themselves. And so that's why I say there's no intent. I think they want to do the best things for their patients as well, but they're coming from a bit of a skewed background. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, this is a hard lesson for me to learn too, even in what I do.
Hmm.
Sometimes you believe that there's a clear choice that's the best thing for someone, and I can do it for them,
Uh-huh.
and they don't want to do it. And I need to accept that it's not my choice,
Yeah,
and it's their choice. And it's a hard lesson to learn for
it
anyone
is.
who
It
cares.
especially when you're a black and white person like I am. Like I'm very black and white so often, and for years I have been actively working on reminding myself that, hey, things actually aren't so black and white. And I think when I first finally realized that, it was such a shock to me that
Yeah,
I really had a hard time. And so I can put myself in their shoes in a sense that they really do believe that this is what is best. They really do believe that vaginal breech birth is risky because, like you said, head entrapment, cord prolapse, both of those things, incredibly rare. Like, incredibly rare that, especially incredibly rare that they would even cause a problem. Head entrapment, I know, is really only happens with premature babies. Cord prolapse can happen, but is it creating a problem or not, then is the question with a vaginal breech birth. And, those are real things that sound really scary. And it would definitely make someone think twice before having a vaginal breech birth. But if you really look at, instead of just saying that's risky, if we look at, okay, well, how risky is it? Hey everyone, Rachel Manns here, and today I have something I'm thrilled to share with you guys. Imagine having a treasure trove of informative, entertaining, and empowering video content about the journey to parenthood right at your fingertips. That's exactly what you get with Informed Pregnancy Plus. For less than 25 cents a day, that's a quarter, guys, you'll gain access to a vast subscription library filled with documentary films, web series, mind and body fitness programs, workshops, and courses covering fertility to parenting and everything in between. Designed for new and expectant parents, as well as pregnancy and birth professionals, Informed Pregnancy Plus is like having a trusted BFF and doctor in one, guiding you through every step of the path to and through parenthood. A few of just my favorite titles are obviously The Business of Being Born, Empowered Mama, Belly Dance for Birth, how fun is that? Ease into Sleep, the Afterbirth Plan, and the Core Connection, an extremely well presented and informative workshop teaching you about your core and pelvic floor and how to keep them healthy. And here's the best part. For a limited time, you can gain full access absolutely free. Just visit informedpregnancy.tv to sign up. Sign up for Informed Pregnancy Plus right now. I'm not kidding, guys. It's really going to help you out. It's my prescription for your informed and empowered parenting journey, all from the comfort of your home. Visit informedpregnancy.tv. That's informedpregnancy.tv, and the link will be in the description below. Now back to the show.
yeah, and also you made a great point, which is that not every situation is the same.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the major flaws of the term breech trials. I didn't really take into account selection. So,
Mm-hmm.
why doesn't cord prolapse happen with head down babies? Because the head blocks the cervix.
Mm-hmm.
But not all breaches are the same. So if I have a foot down by the cervix or nothing down by the cervix, where it's kind of floating,
Mm-hmm.
that opens up the risk for a cord coming through to a much greater degree than, let's say, a butt down sitting
Yeah.
right up against the cervix, which can block the cord from coming through just like a head would. So those two scenarios are very different. The statistical risk for one is much greater than the other. But the study
Yes.
didn't really take that into account, and neither do practitioners today
Right.
when they tell you that it's not a choice for you. So you could mitigate risk in a lot of different ways. For
Mm-hmm.
example, head entrapment would be a lot less common for somebody who has what, I don't like any of these obstetric terms, but what they call a proven pelvis. So a baby
Mm-hmm.
has come through this pelvis before without getting stuck. So
Mm-hmm.
I have patients all the time that have two babies and they come through, they're, let's say, average weight and size. They come through no problem at all, no
Mm-hmm.
hiccups at all. And then the third one is a frank breech baby with a butt down,
Mm-hmm.
same size as the other two.
Mm-hmm.
The odds of head entrapment become extremely low after those two proven pelvis births, and the odds of cord prolapse are extremely low because the butt's sitting right up against the
Mm-hmm.
cervix. So if you took 2,000 of those clients and
Mm-hmm.
put half of them into a cesarean birth and half of them into a vaginal birth, one can only imagine and bet hard that
Mm-hmm.
the results would shift in the other direction, and probably not just by a small amount. Probably
Yeah.
the better outcomes would be much greater for the people giving birth to their breech babies vaginally than by cesarean. But because the study didn't really take into account selection,
Mm-hmm.
those numbers are skewed. And 2 years after the term breech trial came out and was published, the researchers, the same group, did a follow-up study
Mm-hmm.
on the 2-year-olds. What is the long-term difference in health in the 2-year-olds that were born vaginally by cesarean? And they found no long-term difference in health. So now 2 years after we stop doing breech birth, we start to scratch our heads and say, okay, wait a second, right after birth, the babies seem more stressed, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
after a vaginal birth and after a cesarean birth. But 2 years later, there's no difference in health.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, did we take away this option?
Mm-hmm.
And really, there was not a strong reason to take away this option. There never is only one study that's a relatively small scale study.
Well, and the term breech trial, there have been some other vaginal breech trials in other countries, and the term breech trial is an outlier compared to the large majority of the other trials. I think largely because the skill of the provider matters. Is your provider skilled in vaginal breech birth? Are they familiar with it? Have they been trained in it or not? And then who knows, maybe picking and choosing which moms are going for vaginal versus cesarean, kind of like you said. If they're all third-time moms who have done this twice already, they're going to have a higher success rate for vaginal breech birth versus a first-time mom. But
These are
that's with
some of
any
the,
birth,
of
even a
course,
head-down birth.
these are some of the other flaws of the term breech trial, which is that it was done in, I believe, 27 countries. I'm not even sure if I can, off the top of my head, name 27 countries. Some of the practitioners had little experience with breech,
Hmm.
if any. Some of them had no real advanced imaging, so they couldn't really do selection to tell what was going on inside. Some of them had no NICU, so
Hmm.
if a baby came out and did struggle and need support, they couldn't really offer advanced support for that baby.
Hmm.
You can't extrapolate that data and take it to, let's say, where I live in Los Angeles at a hospital with a level 1 NICU, like a top level NICU, that delivers 9,000 babies a year,
Hmm.
um, and say it's the same.
Right.
And so some of these studies were pointed out 4 years after the Turnbridge trial was published by a doctor named Glazerman, who basically made the recommendation that the findings of the Turnbridge trial should be retracted
Yeah.
because of all these flaws. And in fact, the United States ACOG made a recommendation shortly after that saying, you
Hmm.
know what, breech birth might be a reasonable option for you
Hmm.
uh, if you can still find a provider who feels confident in doing it and has the training and skills to do it.
Which
And
is the hard part.
by that point, 6 years had gone by. Entire classes of medical students had never seen a breech birth.
Hmm.
And for everybody else, they hadn't done them in so long. They didn't feel comfortable. If you talk to
Hmm.
them, they don't feel comfortable anymore doing it. And it's no longer the community norm, which is a
Hmm.
big deal because anybody who practices medicine is, in the United States especially, is just a target for liability. We are a
Yes.
very litigious country. We'd love to sue everybody when things don't go exactly how we want them to.
Yes.
And so malpractice is extremely high. Going through a malpractice case is god awful, terrible. It's just a disaster.
Hmm.
nobody wants any of that. And so when you go against the community norm, even if you're not doing anything that's quote unquote risky, it's hard to defend if anything goes wrong, even if it has nothing to do with,
Yes.
let's say, attending a vaginal breech birth.
Yes.
And so, what's the benefit for any provider?
Hmm.
There's no more money in it if we're motivated by money. There's more risk for the provider, which does not
Hmm.
necessarily mean more risk for the patient. Um, and, it's just if there's not a confidence and a comfort in doing it or total lack of training, it is a
Hmm.
different experience attending a breech birth. You need to have training.
Hmm.
And even the intellectually curious young doctors and residents who want to learn really have no forum for learning here in the United States
Right.
because how many could you see? Even if you're in a place where there
Right.
is a doctor who does them or a midwife who
Hmm.
does them, the incidence is so low, the occurrence of people doing them is so low that you can't really get enough. I've talked to doctors who did them in their residency before the term breach
Hmm.
trial. We just did them all the time. We didn't even care. Nobody it didn't raise a pink flag, certainly not a
Yeah.
red flag. And they just got so much experience doing them. They felt really
Hmm.
confident doing them. And you can't get that anymore. And so
Yeah.
all of that kind of led me to make a movie because I'm on the more human side of it. I see people coming in, chiropractors have these
Hmm.
techniques to open up the hips and pelvis and try to create an environment where the baby should want to go head down if there's
Hmm.
nothing physically blocking that move, and the pelvis should be able to better accommodate the movement if it's functional, if it's not stiff, tight, and restricted. And so
Yeah.
we have these techniques, and I see people coming in all the time, and they're just the human toll, the toll on the spirit and the
Yes.
mind, and
Hmm.
then eventually the body is really immense. And I don't think that medical doctors get to see that very often. And
Correct. Yeah.
so it doesn't play into their decision making. And so I wanted to make a film about it and just sort of put out some uh, perspective, like we said at the beginning, what we both focus on, Rachel, you and I, is compiling information, just putting it out in a way that can be absorbed. So
Yeah.
we made this film, Heads Up, The Disappearing Art of Vaginal Breech Delivery, and still very popular. So people are still looking for information
Hmm.
on vaginal breech birth. It's just really hard to find a provider.
Yes, it is. And I love that you have made this movie. I know the only other two training options I really know of for vaginal breech birth would be Breech Without Borders or Dr. Stu Fishburne. Um, I don't know anything else. I've taken two Breech Without Borders trainings, and they are hands down by far my absolute favorite trainings I've taken. And I've taken a lot of different trainings. But spinning babies is another one, which is really helpful in helping babies to go, giving babies the space to go head down, just like chiropractic is. But the vaginal breech birth trainings are my favorite because I think you learn so much. We have been taught pretty much our entire adult lives that vaginal breech birth is not safe. I've had clients who have had breech babies, and I've said to them, "Hey, would you like to discuss the potential of a vaginal breech birth?" And many of my clients are on board with it. Yes, they want to talk about it. They want to think about it. I've had a couple go ahead and do it, but I've also had some say, "No, I don't even want to talk about it. That freaks me out."
Yeah, very understandable.
Yes, especially with the way our current culture is that, it's stated that it's not safe at all. Um, Two things that I have been thinking about while you were talking. Number one, I just watched an episode of Friends two nights ago where I've seen the show so many times, but never had it clicked in my head that Rachel has a breech baby.
I did not know that.
Yes, Rachel's baby was breech, and they didn't find out until it was rumping, which is the breech term for crowning.
Crowning.
They didn't find out till it was rumping, which realistically doesn't make sense because with a vaginal breech birth, usually meconium comes out first, and that's kind of the first sign that baby's breech. But yes, I thought, oh, this mainstream TV show that people love actually has a baby born breech.
That's really cool. I did not know that. My wife
Yeah,
knows every episode of Friends backwards and forwards, so
right? Well,
I'm
go
going to ask
watch
her
this
about
one
this.
again.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other thing, I love how you brought up the 2-year study and the difference in health in the 2-year-olds, like the 2-year follow-up. I think something that the term breach trial didn't really address was, did they do a 2-year follow-up in how mom was doing?
I think that the study really wasn't about mom.
Right.
This and oftentimes,
It's not
um,
about mom, unfortunately.
unfortunately, the study's not about mom. But yeah, I mean, or future pregnancies. So,
Hmm.
one of the determinations when my patients are trying to think it through, the pros and cons, one thing I always tell them to consider is, are you planning to have any more babies? Because
Right.
if you are, is your next pregnancy and birth going to be affected by the choice that you make now?
Right.
And that's
Absolutely.
something that never gets talked about either.
Nope, it doesn't. And that's something I learned from one of my Breech Without Borders trainings was statistically, moms recover better and future pregnancies do better if mom had a vaginal breech birth because there's no scar to worry about for the next pregnancy. And that cesarean scar, number one, it does increase the risk of rupture. I think most people thinking about a vaginal birth after C-section know that there is a small, very small increased chance in uterine rupture. But that that cesarean scar can also cause the placenta to attach to the scar.
Right, so you get a placenta accreta, and it's a
Hmm.
significant increase in the odds of that happening after just one cesarean birth, and it could be a significant complication. So again, that
Hmm.
would seem like something that even when you're making the decision for what to do now with this first pregnancy breech baby, that you
Hmm.
would want to take into account, but it's rarely mentioned.
Yep, absolutely.
And then, of
Um,
course, you only have two choices, like you said. After that, after you have a C-section, you have to choose: do I want to have a vaginal birth after cesarean with whatever
hmm.
that set of risks and
Hmm.
benefits include, or do I want to have a second cesarean with whatever set of risks and benefits that includes? Which is,
Right.
if you're not definitely not going to have any more kids, you can not think about that if you don't want to. But it's a factor for some people and not for other people. So
Yep.
everyone's different, and that's why I make these films. I have another one called Trial of Labor, which is all about
Hmm.
VBAC.
I think we've
Um,
talked about that one in the past.
yes, and so my goal is not to like scream from the rooftops, everybody should have a vaginal birth. Far from it.
Hmm.
My goal is you should have the choice. You should be able to make the choice. And so I don't
Absolutely.
mean to sugarcoat it. Like it's not like there's no risk in these choices. It's
Right.
just that there's risk in all the choices. There's no way to get a baby out of you 100% risk free. And
Yep.
since you're the one who has to do it and you're the one who lives with the outcomes, you should be the one who's the major decision maker if you want to be. Some people don't want to be. They want
Hmm.
a doctor to make all the decisions for them, and that's fine too. So
Hmm.
I'm just out there saying vaginal breech delivery is, even according to ACOG, still a decent option.
Yep.
They put strict guidelines on it and only for singleton babies or the second baby after twins. Um, but even according to them, it's a reasonable option. But I think people just don't know that. Also, to what you said
Hmm.
about the word on the street about breech baby, when we
Hmm.
had the premiere for Heads Up, it was kind of interesting because we had a panel of, at the time, providers who were still attending breech birth, and there were several,
Hmm.
and also women who had delivered breech babies vaginally, and some of them had both a vaginal
Hmm.
delivery with a breech baby and a head down. So not both, meaning in terms of cesarean. They had two vaginal deliveries, one breech, one vertex. And somebody in the audience said, how much more painful was the breech birth than the vertex birth? And two of the moms were like, no, actually, it was the other way around.
Hmm.
Like the whole time I was in labor, instead of this hard baseball pushing up against my pelvis, I had a squishy bum. And then
Hmm.
at the last minute, there was that big moment when the head came through, and that was it. So,
That's what I've
uh,
heard too.
yeah. And you've attended breech births, right?
Backed by the most up to date science and research, we bring you the best prenatal on the market. Full Well is an amazing prenatal vitamin formulated with the best ingredients and bioavailable nutrient and mineral forms that help to fill in nutrition gaps for mom and baby. These prenatal vitamins are tested for consistent dosing and heavy metals and then verified by a third party for every single batch. That way, you know what you are buying is truly what you need.
Not only does Full Well have an amazing prenatal, they also carry women and men's fish oil, a men's multivitamin, a fertility booster, and an amazing Nourished Nerves calming tincture, which is one of our favorites. We are both so happy to announce that we can offer you guys a 10% discount on your first order. So you just have to use the code TNBT10 So that's the Natural Birth Talk, TNBT 10. The link is in the description below. You can insert that code into the coupon code box to save. Hey, Tiffany, do you have any tips for someone who pee-pees their pants a little bit when they say jump or sneeze? I'm just asking for a friend.
Actually, I have a fantastic suggestion that can be done in the comfort of your own home and was created by published researchers with a background in exercise physiology and physical therapy. It's called Tighten Your Tinkler.
Oh my gosh, silly name, but it must have some serious results.
Yeah, learn more by listening to the audio testimonial in the description or use code TNBT50 for $50 off the signature program.
Hey, listener, do you want a comprehensive yet concise and inexpensive online at your own pace natural birth education course to help you prepare for natural birth, pregnancy, and postpartum? Then check out the description below for that and our helpful products guide. Now back to the show. Yes, so I've attended 2/3. I say it that way. The first one I attended, both of them were home births, actually. And I have found, at least in my area, which is the St. Louis, Missouri area, the home birth midwives are more likely to do a vaginal breech birth than the OBs. Although there are a couple, one or two OBs in our area that do consider it. And a few more for if it's a breech baby B, like in a set of twins. But the first one I attended was a set of twins, and they were being born at home. This was mom's fifth and sixth babies, I think. And nobody knew. Yeah, I know. Nobody knew babies were breech until she was in the tub and she was laboring, and I was looking, and all of a sudden a foot popped out. And I was like, okay, so I let the midwife know. Yes, so they were both breech. And so a foot popped out with baby A, and I let the midwife know. And, we just waited because the general rule is you don't touch a breech baby unless you have to. So we just waited. Baby came on out all by herself. And then next baby was breech also. And so baby B came out breech in the water. Neither of them needed any help with anything. Mom did a great job. And it was perfect. And then... So that was my 2/3, But then the next one was actually just back in October. And I am a midwife's assistant for a local home birth practice as well as a doula. And so this was mom's seventh baby in this case. And her husband was, I know.
Big families are clients.
Yeah. And her husband was an EMT. And basically they told the midwife I assist with that they were not going to the hospital. They knew baby was breech ahead of time. And so it wasn't a surprise this time like it was with the twins. But I went up with the midwife. I helped assist. And again, baby came out. We didn't have to do anything. Baby did everything he was supposed to do. And he was born perfectly and beautifully on the living room floor. And it was perfect. So, those experiences really make you question I was already questioning C-section for vaginal breech birth before that happened, right? But then you have those experiences and you see how perfect it was. And you think, man, had she gone to a hospital, she would have undergone major surgery for this.
Right. I've attended several breech births that just look like births.
Yeah.
When there's no complication. And it's the same with head down babies. They just look like births when there's no complications. Both of them can have complications.
Absolutely.
We have, when it comes to breech on our podcast, Informed Pregnancy, we have a 3-part series that's extremely popular called Breech 101, Part 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
And 2 obstetricians and 2 midwives, and we talk about everything under the sun related to breech. Maybe
I love that.
Some of the things that cause breech, different types of breech positioning, remedies for trying to get babies to come head down naturally, medically, options for delivery if the baby remains breech at the end. So there's a lot to learn there. And then another one on the external cephalic version, which I think also has undergone some changes over the past few years. And some doctors are not wanting to do them at all. So they don't even mention that it's an option.
Okay.
Some do it, and whether or not there's regional anesthesia involved is becoming a much bigger topic for discussion. And we break it down. I think all the different elements of it that we could think of, and it's I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but you couldn't make a choice without the information, so we made that one.
I love that.
And then you mentioned the twin breeches. We
Hmm.
have a series called Twins, Breeches, and Automobiles because this mom spontaneously gave birth to her first baby in the car on the way to the hospital, and then
Good for
her
her.
twins were both breech, and she found one of the last remaining doctors who attends breech birth in Los Angeles at the time and makes a plan to have them vaginally at the hospital. And then we have other breech episodes like Cody Horn giving birth breech at home with Dr. Fishbein, who you talked about earlier. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that we're putting together and that you're putting together to better inform people. And I think when you look at the choices and you're like, okay, yeah, I see all this and I'd like to have a cesarean birth, that's just still a much more empowering thing than
Hmm.
not being told until after you have your cesarean birth that you might have been able to have a vaginal birth.
Yes, that is so true. So I actually have a story about a mom who's actually a local doula here in the St. Louis area who had that exact situation where she went ahead and had the C-section, and this was with our local birthing center actually. And then later, as she became a doula, found out that she had more options. And so she had the C-section with her first baby for vaginal breech presentation. And then when she was pregnant with her second, she opted to have an HBAC, so a home birth after C-section, with the practice I assist with. And she had a moment in that pregnancy where she thought, oh my gosh, what if my baby's breech again? And I just gently reminded her, hey, you have options this time. And of course, her baby was head down and she had a beautiful H-back, a quite quick H-back, actually, quite quick birth. And, never had to worry about it again. But I know that in talking to her, she really wishes she would have had that choice
Yeah,
with her
and
first.
that's what you see in Heads Up, the film, is that not having the choice is really disempowering. And
Yeah.
again, if you have the choice and make the choice for the cesarean birth, it's a lot different than being pushed into the cesarean without options.
Yes.
In Los Angeles, in California, a number of years ago, they took away breech from the scope of practice of midwives. So you had a whole bunch of midwives comfortable, confident doing breech birth, and now they were not allowed to.
Mm-hmm.
Doctors who are allowed to but aren't comfortable and confident, and so the option just titrates down a lot. And if you think about it,
It's frustrating.
there's about 3 to 4% breech
Mm-hmm.
on a first pregnancy. We have 4 million live births in the United States a year on average. It's 160,000 breech babies a year. Most of them are having a C-section just because they're breech. And most of
Yeah.
those, if they have another baby, will have a C-section just because they're not given the choice for VBAC.
Yeah, that's
So
so true. And
think about how
then
many cesareans a year in the United States are happening just because we took away the breech option. It's a big number.
it's a lot. And then I know with twins, there's what is it, 40-50% chance that baby B is going to be breech. And, I think there are a lot more providers who are comfortable with a breech baby B versus just a breech singleton. I think there are more, but there are still plenty of providers who are not comfortable with a breech baby B. I have one friend who had her first baby vaginally, who had twins. First baby was head down, born vaginally. Second baby was breech, wheeled her back for a C-section, took her via C-section.
Oh my goodness. In the film, we have a mom who was breech but went into labor spontaneously before her scheduled date and
Mm-hmm.
progressed very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And when she got to the hospital, they panicked. Again, they have no training, so it's a
Yeah.
panicky moment for them. And they essentially knocked her out
Mm-hmm.
completely and kicked out her husband and wheeled her into an emergency surgery where in the op report they talk about literally pushing the baby back up because the
Oh,
baby was coming down so that they can do the cesarean birth. I
that
mean,
makes me so sad for her.
and otherwise a very young, strong, healthy woman that, Dr. Fishbein looked at that report. He's like, she's probably like 3 to 5 minutes away from just delivering. It could have
Right.
been, she has no memory of that birth at all. She was knocked out. Her
Oh,
husband wasn't allowed to be there. They have no memory of that birth.
that's really sad. That just makes me so sad. I hate stories like that. But The reality is those stories happen. That is not the first story I've heard of something like that happening. And then, like you said, if they have a C-section for the vaginal breech birth or for the breech presentation, then chances are they're just going to have a C-section for their next birth too. I think VBACs are much more common now than they were 10, 20 years ago, but there's still not a high rate of moms, not a high percentage of moms trying to do a VBAC because so many of them are not even given the option.
I think you still hear the old adage, once a cesarean, always a cesarean,
Hmm.
which ironically was said by a guy who was trying to prevent doctors from doing unnecessary cesarean.
I've
His
heard
name
that
was
before too.
Edward Cragen. Like once C-section became safer, doctors wanted to jump in and do it, like
Mhm.
new technology, amazing. But he was warning that there are consequences to doing cesarean that you should take into
Hmm.
account before doing it. And one of them is she might not be able to ever have a vaginal birth if you do a C-section now. He was trying to prevent cesarean, and at the end of the day, he's probably rolling over in his grave because that phrase is just people hear it and understand it as, oh, because I had a C-section, that's my only choice moving forward, which is not
Right.
true. And in
Yeah.
that front, ACOG has really they did a symposium, I think, in 2010
Hmm.
on VBAC, and it was pretty comprehensive, and s- impl- the results of it concluded that more VBAC should be available to more people.
Hmm.
And they did take some steps to remove some of the roadblocks that were preventing that from happening. So you do see a shift. It's small, but at least it's moving and it's moving in the right direction. And
Yeah.
what's a little comforting is that at least more people have the option now, even if they're not opting for it.
Right.
In huge numbers. It is trending up, and it's an option, so that's comforting.
That is true. Now we just got to get breech birth to follow the same the
Yeah,
same
that's
pattern,
going to be
right?
a much harder. What I see here in Los Angeles is the practitioners who do or did feel comfortable and have the confidence and
Hmm.
training are, stopping to practice. They're either
Yeah.
retiring or passing, and
Yeah.
nobody's replacing. Very few. We have two younger doctors that give me some hope here, but very, very few.
Well, and then the other problem arises with, okay, if you don't find out babies persistently breach until 36 weeks, how are you going to find and your current provider won't do a vaginal breech birth, then you have to scramble to see if a provider who will do a vaginal breech birth is even willing to take you on that late in the pregnancy. Is, like you said, is an ECV an option? Is that an option you want to use? There's so many last minute questions, which is why, so many women 30 something weeks suddenly start going to a chiropractor like you, right? Because they think, okay, and they know this gives me a chance of getting a head down, baby.
Right. You always tell people check for breach at 32 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Check for breach at 32 weeks. Doctors generally won't, largely because there's nothing they can do about it till 37 weeks. So
Mm-hmm.
why make you nervous if you don't need to be? Which I understand, but there are a lot of
Mm-hmm.
things you can do about it.
Yeah.
Even though they can't, you can. And at 32 weeks, statistically, about 10% of babies are not head down yet on a first pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in the 10%, then at birth, it's around 4%, 3 or 4%. So about half of those will turn, a little more than half, and about half of them won't turn. But the things you can do to kind of give your baby the best chance of turning
Mm-hmm.
can be done at 32 weeks safely. So
Mm-hmm.
I would say check for breach at 32 weeks. But yeah, people oftentimes don't find out till 36, and then there's very
Mm-hmm.
little reaction time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else you want to say about the vaginal breech birth? I mean, this is definitely a topic that I could talk about all day. I think I say that on most of my podcast episodes because most of the topics are topics I could talk about all day, but I really am such a fan of giving women the option to do a vaginal breech birth. But is there anything you want to add? Because I do have one more question about one more topic for you.
And no, I think we had a pretty comprehensive conversation about it. My summary point is that I think that it should be an option or choice for people, and it should be explained what the risks are and what
Mm-hmm.
the benefits are to that choice and to the other choices that are available. And then I don't think there's a wrong choice,
Right.
there's your choice, and the only wrong choice is not having a choice.
I completely agree with that. Tell me really quickly a little bit more about you did the video Heads Up, right? That's what yours
Yes.
is called, and that
Mhm.
can be viewed on Informed Pregnancy Plus.
Right. So we have a streaming platform, Informed
Hmm.
Pregnancy Plus, which you can access at informedpregnancy.tv or
Hmm.
just search for Informed Pregnancy on Apple, Android, Roku, Apple TV. We're on all of those apps. And it's sort of like Netflix for pregnancy and birth and
Hmm.
postpartum and parenting. We aggregated about 30 documentaries, most of the popular ones that you see, and web series, some that we produce ourselves and some that we license. We have a lot of childbirth education on there. We
Hmm.
have mind and body stuff, yoga, meditation, belly dance for birth, little mini workshops on lots of different topics. And it's just in line with my goal of compiling information, making it easily accessible and digestible. So anybody who has an internet, even if you have weak internet, we've gone the extra mile to use technology that still helps you stream
Nice.
our content on there. It's free for 3 days. You can explore anything and everything on there in the subscription library. And after that, it's under $7 a month
That's
currently.
awesome.
And if that's still challenging for you, just write to me and we'll make it accessible to you anyway.
Oh, I love
But
that.
and it's a struggle because we're trying to keep it affordable enough that anybody can subscribe to it and get the data, but also we want to really make sure that we compensate the creators so that
Of
they're able
course.
to go out there and keep creating. But
Of course.
for sure, all of us are on the same team, and if you need that information, you can't afford it, just let me know and we'll make it happen for you.
Absolutely. I
Um,
say that about my online class all the time too.
Yeah, I mean, none of us are in it for the mega wealth.
Right.
Um, but other things that are exciting about Informed Pregnancy Plus. So in our podcast, our original podcast, Informed Pregnancy, one of the most popular types of episodes are before and after birth stories. So I'll interview
Hmm.
somebody before they have their baby about the pregnancy and about the birth that they're planning to have, and then
Hmm.
after they have the baby about the birth they actually had, and they share what they learned from going through the process that they presumably couldn't have known unless they went through it, until they went through it.
Hmm.
And so people listening get a lot of pearls of wisdom
Hmm.
out of hearing those stories. They're all, to me, they're all super interesting, whether it
Hmm.
goes exactly as they planned or it doesn't go as they planned. Sometimes because it went even better than they planned, and sometimes because it took a turn in a different direction. They're all pretty popular. We've been blessed with a good number of celebrities sharing those stories, which are extremely popular.
Yes,
But
you have episodes with Hilary Duff, which I absolutely love those episodes because I was such a fan of hers when I was younger.
and I did not realize until I met her and started talking to her that she's literally girl next door. She's just like you, warm, charming, easy to talk to.
Oh.
And she's a great storyteller, and she's had vaginal birth in the hospital with all the drugs and had a very good experience.
Hmm.
She's had vaginal birth at home with none of the drugs and had a very good experience. And it's just great
Hmm.
to hear from somebody who doesn't like hate one and love the other.
Right.
You
You should
know,
give her my email and tell her to reach out.
okay, absolutely. She did, Mandy Moore did, Kat Von D did. If I think about it, there's just a lot of them that have come on and shared openly because when they listen, they benefit from listening, and so they're happy to share as well.
Hmm.
Um, so one of the feedbacks we got about before and after birth stories is they're too short. Sometimes you have a
Mm.
40-hour intricate birth, and we tell it in 40 minutes, which is like
Yeah.
1 minute per hour.
Yeah.
And so we took that feedback and we now have recorded 3 seasons. The first one is just coming out now of a new podcast where we tell one birth story over an entire season. That's 10 episodes
Oh.
long. It's kind of this one, the first season is a pretty familiar story, unfortunately. A mom who planned to have a home birth and then ended up
Hmm.
in a cesarean birth that she was very underprepared for,
Oh.
and the toll that it took on her. And now we catch up with her pregnant with her second baby, and she's doing a lot of processing,
Hmm.
physical processing, emotional processing, ancestral processing. We interview her and her
Awesome.
husband and her midwife and her doula and her obstetrician and her Reiki healer and her mom and weave it
Oh.
together into a really beautiful story. And she's just a great person, a great character that immediately captivates your attention. So that series is called One Way or a Mother.
Okay.
It's on Informed Pregnancy Plus, but it's also going to be on every podcast app. So if you search for One Way or a Mother, you'll be able to listen to every episode. And seasons 2 and 3 get really crazy, interesting
I love
stories
that idea though. Like it's almost like the TV show 24, where each
in
episode
real
is
time.
like 1 hour done in real time. My dad loves that show. Um,
Yeah, we
that's
modeled it after Serial, the podcast Serial, which
okay.
tells a really complex story, slowly building up episode by episode. I was actually going
Mm.
to call it Baby Serial, but I don't want to get sued, so we call it One Way or a Mother. Um, and then because I think there's just not enough emphasis on postpartum, my wife is a
hmm
psychologist and she does so much postpartum processing. Um, on our newest web series that we're working on that will come out in a quarter or so, it focuses on postpartum and things you can do for the mind, body, and spirit to transition into the
And that's
postpartum and to motherhood.
the fourth try is that one?
Yeah, that one's called The Fourth Try.
Yes. That's what I
And
really wanted to talk about too, because I think the fourth trimester is so important, especially if you have a birth that didn't go exactly the way you wanted it to. But even if you have a birth that was like perfect and beautiful and exactly what you wanted, moms need to know about moms and dads and everyone, families need to know about the fourth trimester.
my experience personally, and I'm just a dude, but my experience personally, and also through the eyes of the thousands and thousands of moms that I work with,
hmm
families, but mostly moms, is
hmm
that postpartum is a rocky period. It's rocky terrain.
hmm
And that may sound bad, but actually, when you're in the right vehicle, rocky terrain can be a lot of fun. Like when you
Yeah.
go jeeping, you might have such an exhilarating experience that you want to go jeeping again. But if you try that rocky terrain in your regular sedan, it's going to be a rough ride, and you'll
hmm
probably, hesitate before trying that again.
Yeah.
And so a little bit of focus on what really happens in that postpartum period
hmm
and planning for it and getting the right vehicle could make it a really great experience.
hmm
And that's kind of what we're trying to do with the fourth try is we take this mom, Jen, who's also very dynamic. She has her baby, and every week for 12 weeks, we set her up with something to do
hmm
to kind of soothe her mind, body, and spirit. So sometimes it's yoga, or it's she does vaginal steaming, she does belly
hmm
binding, she does a postpartum counseling session, even her newborn photo shoot. There's stuff to
hmm
garner out of. She does Reiki, she does a salt cave, and then she does, as she gets past the 6 week mark, she starts to do pelvic floor physical therapy and workouts. And it's not like we expect anybody to do all of these things,
Right.
but it's
But we
it's
love all of those things.
and it's an introduction to see what is this and what is it like. And she talks about dynamically what it felt like. And we talked to the provider who did it and, learn more about that modality. So it's really eye-opening on ways that you can care for yourself after having a baby during that rocky terrain.
I love that. And to just loop it back around to that vaginal breech birth, especially in the case that you had a breech baby, you ended up having a C-section, that, like I said, that fourth trimester is important for everybody, but especially when your birth isn't exactly what you were expecting it to be, which happens so often, unfortunately. Um, Especially when it's not what you were expecting to be and now you're recovering from a C-section, then whether that was because of a breech baby or whatever other reason, it's so important to just have those options and to know what your options are and to know how to go about doing them and when to go about doing them. I mean, you mentioned pelvic floor physical therapy, and I think a lot of moms have that in their minds now, but they have to remember to wait 6 weeks.
Mhm. Yeah, what's really cool? There's a handful of doctors here who check at 3,
Oh,
and
that's
sometimes
good.
clear their patients at 3 or 4 weeks.
Hmm.
And it just became clear to me that actually probably a lot of people could be cleared earlier than 6 weeks. But
Interesting.
by 6 weeks, most people could be cleared, and so I think that's why they wait 6 weeks.
Yeah.
But midwives here for sure, they they're much more hands-on afterwards, and sometimes will
hmm
we'll check and clear patients earlier. And, some people don't want to. My kid's 20 and I'm still not excited to work out. But
I
uh,
I feel that.
but I do have these moms who are just really itching to get out, and it's
Hmm.
almost psychologically painful that they have to kind of hold back on their
Hmm.
exercise. Sometimes they need to, but sometimes they don't. So
Yeah.
if you're one of those people, ask if you can get checked earlier.
Yeah. Well, and I like to tell my mamas like that too, because I think moms like that are more common now in our culture because our culture is so busy versus maybe some more kind of laid back, calmer cultures. But I always tell them, hey, did you stand up from the couch with your baby in your arms today? You did a squat. Good job.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. I don't really have anything else for you today. I have so enjoyed this chat. I mean, I knew I would having you back on, but and then combining that with vaginal breech birth and fourth trimester talks, these are all my favorite things. Do you have anything else you want to add before we finish up?
I really just want to thank you for all of the work that you do for your
Thank you.
podcast. I listen to the other episodes when I'm not the guest. I learn a lot from you, and your audience learns a lot from you, and I'm grateful to be on your team.
Thank you. That was very sweet. All right, listeners, thank you so much for listening to Dr. Berlin and I. We really appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at contact@thenaturalbirthsite.com. I am also going to link Dr. Berlin's podcast and Informed Pregnancy Plus in the description below. Definitely check those out because, guys, if I can pay $7 a month for Discovery Plus, you can pay $7 a month for Informed Pregnancy Plus. So check all of that out. Don't be afraid to message me with any questions, and I'll talk to you guys in the next episode. Hi, Rachel Manns again. If you want to learn more, please subscribe to and rate this podcast and head over to thenaturalbirthsite.com to check out our online natural birth education course, birth story blog, YouTube channel, and more.